but let me record that.
Why are you
first.
staying like that?
What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? Go.
Apple has become one of the world's most successful corporations, creating millions of jobs around the world while revolutionizing the world through their amazing technology and products that they continue to develop. As Apple continues to grow as one of the largest tech companies in the world, their impact in the world is becoming more and more apparent. Apple and many of its innovations all over the world have constantly shaped many aspects of people's lives on an everyday basis. On Apple's rise to become one of the most powerful and well-known companies in the world, they faced many problems, challenges, and obstacles that they had to overcome. However, as Apple faced these obstacles and overcame them, they were able to drastically transform the company and become the company that they are today. Apple has transformed from a two-man company run out of a garage to becoming one of the world's largest companies and has completely and forever altered how people use and view technology. This is the history of Apple. Apple was founded in 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak with a vision of changing how the people viewed computers. They started the company in Steve Jobs' garage where they developed the first ever computer known as Apple I. The Apple I was a very primitive version of a computer. It was sold without a monitor, keyboard, and casing. It was very difficult for them to sell considering the computer market was very small and limited. Then Apple computers began to make great strides and began to turn the company around with the next computer they made, the Apple II. The Apple II greatly revolutionized the computer industry and helped Apple. It was also the first computer to introduce color graphics. The Apple II helped increase sales of Apple computers, which jumped from $7.8 million in 1978 to $117 million in 1980. The Apple II and other computer products from Apple that Apple helped made become extremely successful in the 1980s. The success of Apple in the 1980s was a large part due to Steve Jobs and the plans that he had set forth. One of these plans that Jobs had involved a tiny company called Adobe. With the help of both these companies, they were able to create desktop publishing. However, the success of Apple in the 1980s was short-lived. It started in 1983 when Steve Wozniak, who was no longer interested in the day-to-day activities of Apple computers, left. In order to make up for the loss of Wozniak, Jobs hired PepsiCo's John Sculley as president of Apple. However, this decision by Steve Jobs ultimately turns on him. Due to the negative relationship and controversial relationship between Jobs and Sculley, Jobs decided to step down from Apple in 1985 and form his new company called Next Software. Initially, after Jobs left, Apple was still able to grow and continue to become successful. However, these were only due to the plans that Jobs had set forth. And then, the plans were set. Apple began to suffer after 1990s. Throughout the early and mid-90s, Apple's market began to suffer after its peak market in 1990. By 1996, many people considered Apple doomed to fail. This caused Apple to make a desperate attempt to save Apple. This attempt was very simple. Apple needed Steve Jobs to come back. So in 1997, Apple bought Steve Jobs' company Next Software and asked Jobs to return to Apple. He did, and he became the interim CEO of Apple. Once Jobs became the new CEO permanently in 2000, he decided to drastically change the company. A large move that Jobs made involved a deal with Microsoft to develop software for Apple's computer, the Mac. This move and many other moves were made by Steve Jobs, allowed for Apple to begin to flourish once again. Jobs was able to completely revolutionize Apple. Apple began to develop many new products once Jobs returned, such as the iPod, which helped create Apple's most profitable sector, the iPhone, and the Mac. This move and many other moves made by Steve Jobs allowed for Apple to begin to flourish. Apple began to have major success through the beginning of the 21st century. And as you can see on this chart, they began to suffer after Jobs left, and then once Jobs rejoined Apple, they began to rise back up in the stock market. Then in 2011, after helping make Apple the frontrunner of all tech companies, Steve Jobs once again stepped down from his position as CEO due to health reasons. He shortly passed away after leaving. However, Jobs left the company in great hands of the former Chief Operating Officer, Tim Cook. Under Cook, Apple continued to develop new products and revolutionize the tech industry. Apple has and is still continuing to grow and still maintains its spot atop the world's most successful and largest companies in the world. As Apple continues to innovate and create new products, they continue to grow and have become the first company and the only company to be worth over $1 trillion on the stock market. Not anymore. Apple has become one of the largest and most successful companies that the world's ever seen. Even though they experienced some major lows, Apple was able to accomplish the goals set forth by Jobs and Wozniak back in 1976 to completely revolutionize the world of the computer.
Yay!